How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to BuzzerBeater, the official BuzzerBeater YouTube channel. Today I wanted to go over something that gets discussed about a lot right around this point in the season, and it kind of goes in cycles of no one asks about it, and then it is a rampage in the forums about people asking for the best final strategy. So as a lot of you know, the semifinals have just ended. So the final matchups are set, and the first game of the finals is going to be taking place at the beginning of this next week. So just kind of talking about what's the best final strategy for BuzzerBeater, since it's a 3-game set opposed to like NBA games and series where it's best of 7 or like a single elimination tournament. Best of 3 is a very unique situation. So some things to think about when you're in the finals and kind of dictates what your strategy should be is looking at, are you a heavy favorite? Are you a slight favorite? Are you a slight underdog? Or are you a heavy underdog? So this can be dependent upon a lot of different aspects. So obviously the player skills and salaries that you have on your roster is going to make up a lot of whether or not you're a favorite or not in the matchup. But also things such as, do you have home court advantage? Home court advantage is going to be something that can be a huge benefit or a huge deterrent in whether or not you can win the title. Also things such as game shape. So as I said, the semifinals just ended, so some teams will come into a situation where their game shape is not as good because they had to play their starters more minutes in the semifinal matchup in order to get to the finals. So game shape's also a huge factor as to whether or not you're a favorite or underdog. And then lastly, enthusiasm. So enthusiasm is something that a lot of managers might not think about as being a huge perk or deterrent as to whether or not you're a favorite or not. But it is something where if you're at, for instance, an encouraged enthusiasm level and your opponent's at a determined, which is like 4 levels higher, then that's, even bigger than home court advantage. That's like double that. If you do have home court and higher enthusiasm, it's going to be really hard for the road team to overcome that. So thinking about these and then coming to the conclusion of, am I a heavy favorite, slight underdog, or heavy underdog? So as for if you're a heavy favorite, so let's say you're the stronger team, you have home court advantage. Typically, these are teams who have kind of ran the league. They're like 19-3, 20-2, or if not even better. And the biggest kind of structure or strategy for if you're a heavy favorite who has home court advantage is just protecting home court. So a lot of times teams can overthink it, try to use game day prep too much, try to do too many cute things with the strategies or tactics, but really all you have to do if you're a heavy favorite and you have home court is protect the game 1 and game 3s where you're at home. I would say playoff crunch time for game 1, playoff normal for game 2, and then playoff crunch time for game 3, and just make sure that you're winning game 1 and game 3. You'll see for the game day prep for game 1, I wrote down none. There are instances where if you have a opponent who's very predictable, you could probably throw an A guess, but the main thing is just looking at not trying to shoot yourself in the foot. So game 2 is where you can go a little bit heavier on game day prep. I wouldn't be double guessing or anything, just because if you're a heavy favorite, generally one guess on playoff normal will help you, because if your opponent's also playing playoff normal, then that means that it's going to be a very close game. And if your opponent plays playoff crunch time for that game 2 of the finals, game 3 is going to be a breeze because you'll have higher enthusiasm than them and you'll be back at home for that game 3. So you'll notice in a lot of these, I don't promote playoff crunch time during game 2 like at all, because the turnaround between game 2 and game 3 of the finals is so little that enthusiasm levels can make a huge difference. So heavy favorite, pretty straightforward of just playoff crunch time, assume you win game 1, and then try to close it out game 2 if you can with like game day prep or tactics. But if not, then you should be able to win a game 3 at home. So just don't do anything too crazy. As for if you're a slight favorite at home, so let's assume that you're a equal team level, but you do have the home court advantage. It's going to be very similar to the last one where you can see playoff crunch time, playoff normal, playoff crunch time. It's going to be the same exact kind of structure because once again, you just want to protect home court. But you will see that for the game day prep, you can be a little bit more aggressive and make use of tactics and game day prep a little bit more since the matchup's a little bit closer and it's not as sure of a victory. So same exact structure as the first one, but looking at potentially moderate game day prep on that game 1 and then moderate or aggressive during that playoff normal game 2. And then same exact thing for game 3 is just not trying to shoot yourself in the foot, but doing enough to win in that 3-game set. This is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting and where I see a lot of teams ask questions in the forums is asking about what if I'm a slight favorite but I'm playing on the road. So sometimes there'll be situations in BuzzerBeater where one conference is stronger than the other. So you might be the stronger or better team or might have better game shape, better enthusiasm, but you don't necessarily have the home court advantage. So for this is where game 1, assuming that the home team is going to playoff crunch time like in the first 2 sequences that I proposed, doing playoff normal with moderate or aggressive game day prep and tactics and kind of going a little bit more aggressive in that game 1 but playing playoff normal, you're essentially trying to steal game 1 because game 2 when you're at home, assuming you're the stronger team, you should be able to win game 2 when you're both going playoff normal. So that's where game day prep, non or moderate for game day prep, and then home, assuming you can win that sets you up for a game 3 where you're playing playoff crunch time, and there's a good chance that you'll have built enthusiasm on your opponent. And then for that game day prep in the 3rd game, you can do moderate or aggressive game day prep. So this is a situation where a lot of times you can sneakily win game 1, and then for game 2, people are tempted to play playoff crunch time and close it out at home. That's definitely an option. However, I do think that's a little bit riskier. So playing it out as playoff normal, and then playoff crunch time if you're a slight favorite, but on the road, I think that's the best structure in my opinion. This is one of the ones where there are some other opinions from high-level managers out there. So if you do have one that you're passionate about, please feel free to comment down below and let me know what your general strategy is. Moving on, this is going to be the opposite of the one we just discussed. So the last one was talking about if you're a slight favorite on the road. This is if you're a slight underdog, but you do have home court advantage. So essentially the opponent from the last example. So this is assuming that you're a slightly weaker team or have slightly worse game shape, but you do have that home court advantage. So this is going to look a very familiar structure, but once again, protecting home court, playoff normal game 2 to build enthusiasm. So you can see the playoff crunch time of game 1, assuming you win game 1, and then for that game 2, playing playoff normal and then just being really aggressive with tactics and game day prep where you can potentially steal it. And then if not, you do have that game 3 where you do have home court advantage. Assuming your opponent doesn't playoff normal game 2, then you have an enthusiasm advantage, but at the very least you'll be equal and have home court advantage. So once again, this is the most standard structure I see of playoff crunch time game 1, playoff normal game 2, and then try to do everything you can to win game 3. Getting into the more underdog-like situation, so if you're a slight underdog, so you're like an equal team level or maybe slightly worse, but you also don't have home court advantage, there's a couple different ways you can do it, and there's 2 different examples that I brought up on this one. But if you're a slight underdog who is on the road for game 1, so you have to play game 1 and game 3 on the road, this is the structure that I view as like the safer option. And maybe if you're less intimidated by the team that you're playing up against. But playing playoff normal game 1 on the road, where your opponent will traditionally play playoff crunch time, that's a place to go aggressive with game day prep, see if you can try to steal the game 1, but assume that you probably won't. And then game 2, you'll have built a little bit of enthusiasm level, and then assuming you're like an equal level team, having home court advantage for game 2 can be huge, because you can play off normal, and in most situations your opponent will also be playing playoff normal, because they'll be sending it on game 3, thinking that you'll play off crunch time at home, since you have to win to play a game 3. So this is what I consider a safer option of playoff normal, and then that game 3, building up that enthusiasm advantage, being more aggressive at game day prep for game 3. A lot of teams will panic after they lose game 1 and think they have to play off crunch time game 2. If you're playing at home for game 2, just know that you don't have to panic a lot of times. More times than not, you can play off normal, be strategic about the game day prep and tactics you're playing, and then win game 2 without having to play off crunch time. Once again, play off crunch time game 2 is a bit of a killer, because if you go to game 3 and you have a lot less enthusiasm than your opponent and you're on the road, it's very, very tough to overcome. Now, the other option for if you're a slight underdog on the road, and what I consider the more risky option, is if you look at playoff crunch time in game 1. So you're on the road. A lot of times the home team will be playoff crunch time in that game 1. The risky way is to try to steal game 1. So going playoff crunch time and moderate or aggressive with game day prep and tactics, and really, really trying to make sure you win game 1. And then assuming you do win game 1, you're kind of in a situation of, okay, what do I do now? Do I play off normal, build enthusiasm, or do I try to close it out immediately? And this is where you can go kind of either route depending on the situation. The biggest downside of this is if you don't win game 1 of the finals, you have playoff crunch time, so you're not going to gain enthusiasm on them. And then that also means that if for some reason they get lucky with game day prep on game 2 and you play off normal, then there's a chance you can lose that. So it's a little bit of a stickier situation for road underdogs, but in general, playoff crunch time is a little bit riskier for the underdog in game 1. And if you want to play it safer, similar to the last one, looking at playoff normal game 1, being more aggressive with game day prep, and then trying to win the next 2 games is a safer route. And lastly, for the road heavy underdog. So this is where if you're a substantially weaker team and you don't have home court advantage, this is where just being really aggressive during game 1 and game 2. I always essentially treated this as like a 2-game series. Like, I just need to win game 1 and game 2. There's some other strategies around this of doing playoff normal, playoff crunch time. But if you're a true underdog, like a truly weaker team, being super aggressive and playing playoff crunch time in that game 1 and then trying to close it out game 2 at home, I think is your best bet. The situation that kind of sucks is if you do win game 1 and then you try to close it out in game 2 but lose, you're essentially done in game 3, because since you've playoff crunch timed both game 1 and game 2, generally game 3 on the road, you just won't have the team, the skills, or the enthusiasm to make it up. So this is where you're really just kind of laying your cards out on the table, saying call my bluff, and trying to win game 1 and game 2. So ultimately, that's kind of the general strategy that I have when I'm looking at finals matchups and what I'd recommend for people based on their situations. Thinking about what your opponent will do can sometimes be the most useful thing, because if you put yourself in their shoes and kind of look at, what's the primary goal for them? Are they going to be looking at trying to just protect home court like most teams will do? Are they going to look at trying to go heavier in game 2 and try to close it out in 2 games? Based on their game shape and kind of their team match up against yours, you can infer some things and really think about what they might try to do, and that helps you with your decision as well. So you can see the Princess Bride right there where they talk about the battle of wits has begun. That really is what the finals in BuzzerBeater is like, because a lot of your decisions is based upon what will my opponent do, and then your opponent is thinking the same thing about you. So that is my general overview of the BuzzerBeater finals and the strategies that I think work best the majority of the time. But if you do have some interesting stories about finals series that you've won in the past or strategies that you have used, please feel free to comment down below. Let me know, and also let me know if you don't agree with some of the guide structure that I've had for the finals, because I know there's a lot of different nuances when it comes to BuzzerBeater finals. But I'm going to go ahead and close the video right there. Good luck to everyone who is in the finals right now, and for those of you who are out, such as myself, I know we're looking forward to the new season, so I'm sure I'll have some more content up very, very soon for all of you. Thanks. Bye-bye.